away with it.
What next for the King as he appears in public for the first time since his shock cancer diagnosis and has a very brief visit with Prince Harry? We're live at Sandringham. Rotten plan. Dentists hit out after the government promises cash for new patients to help people get access. We'll tell you why.
It's not a sticking plaster over a wound. It's someone waving a box of plasters at you as they run away out the door. It's that useless.
Weather warnings after the last extra cold snap. Our meteorologist will be with us to tell you where the worst will be.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone.
Plus, inspired by the movie Cool Runnings, will be joined by the man who runs marathons with a fridge on his back. In his fridge will be with us.
Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind.
Good morning. We'll update you on the King's health very shortly, but first, a Sky News investigation into allegations of misogyny and sexual harassment among paramedics. Let's get more, should we? Rachel has been looking into this for us. Good morning. Tell me more.
Good morning, Kay. Well, I've spent months speaking to current and former paramedics who have described to me over and over again a culture in our ambulance services across all 4 countries in the United Kingdom that they say is riddled with sexual harassment, misogyny, and in extreme cases, sexual abuse as well. And just a warning, my report includes descriptions of sexual abuse, of self-harm and suicide as well.
They joined the ambulance service because they wanted to help people. But Sky News has spoken to female paramedics who say they found a culture there plagued by misogyny and sexual harassment. Freya says she put up with it for years, until one day a colleague locked her in the back of an ambulance and sexually assaulted her.
He just put his hand straight down my top. I was like, yeah, in shock. I couldn't move. I didn't know how to react. I just froze, absolutely froze. And if that wasn't enough, he then took my breast out and put my breast in his mouth. He took his pen and he drew a smiley face above and below my nipple. I just remember going into the station immediately when we got back, and I washed and scrubbed myself.
The trauma led Freya to try to amputate her breast and attempt to take her own life. She's received compensation from the trust and no longer works as a paramedic. After students started coming forward to complain about their experiences of sexual harassment, the College of Paramedics began an investigation.
We have found that our female student council members are experiencing misogyny and sexual harassment, if not on a daily, on a weekly basis, by a minority of people who just feel that that behaviour is acceptable. Sometimes that progresses to a really difficult space where I won't sign you off until maybe you come out for a date with me, or I won't sign you off until you send me a picture of yourself.
Laura is a newly qualified paramedic. She says women in the ambulance service are forced to put up with jokes and sexualising comments disguised as banter.
It's exhausting coming to work, dealing with inappropriate behaviour and sexual comments. It's awful. I actually look forward to the winter months where it's colder, where I can wear my jacket more often so that I'm more covered up. We've got the same uniform, you know, we've got a standardised unisex uniform, and I shouldn't have to feel like I'm being objectified and looked up and down by my colleagues, but that is the case.
An NHS spokesperson said any form of sexual misconduct is completely unacceptable, and that every ambulance trust in England has committed to a plan which commits to improving sexual safety. A number of culture reports in recent years have highlighted the open secret of sexual harassment, but victims want that secret to now be fully understood and finally dealt with.
Well, as you heard at the end of the piece there, Kay, there have been a number of cultural reports into various trusts in recent years, national reports as well, and some of these are really damning. The trusts themselves will say that they are aware, that they have changed, that they are changing. You heard that NHS statement as well. This is very much an open secret. But many of the women I speak to say it is still going on. You heard there at the end from a current paramedic who described literally wanting to wear a coat to work so she won't get sexualising comments day in, day out by her colleagues. This is what they're putting up with. And she stressed again and again to me how much she loves her job, how much the majority of her colleagues, she says, are absolutely fantastic people, but almost as though there's a rot at the heart of the institution that's been going on for decades, and they want to see it finally fixed.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. If you or anyone you know needs help from the issues in that story, you can call the Samaritans 116123, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. In other news, the King has spent the night at Sandringham after starting his treatment for cancer and holding a rather brief meeting with Prince Harry. Let's get more, should we? Ivor standing by for us now at Buckingham Palace. Hello to you, Ivor. Very good morning. So Harry travelled about, I don't know, 5,000 miles. He saw his dad for half an hour.
45 minutes, we're told. Not much longer than half an hour. Clearly a very short meeting. Was it a sweet meeting? We don't know for now, but I think the fact that Prince Harry did make this long journey, 5,000 miles, a transatlantic overnight dash to be here for it, I think that says a lot. I think that says how important both sides saw it to have a face-to-face meeting. I think it says that perhaps this is a time when family feuds are being set aside in light of the bigger picture. However, having said that, there are no plans, we understand, for Prince Harry to meet Prince William whilst he's here. On Prince William, the Prince of Wales, he returns to work today, his first day back after taking 3 weeks off to be with his wife, Kate, following her abdominal surgery, her planned operation. He has an investiture event at Windsor and a charity dinner in London later. And I think they would have been focused on his return to work anyway, had it not been for the King's cancer diagnosis. But in light of that, clearly that takes on extra significance today because it's the start of what will be a much busier period for Prince William and other senior royals, all of whom will take on a much more prominent role publicly now, stepping up whilst King Charles steps back from public official duties. King Charles and Queen Camilla, they're at Sandringham now. They went there after the meeting with Prince Harry. He's stepping back from public engagements, and I think Prince William stepping up, returning to work, is a signal of stability front of house for the royal household, whilst behind the scenes, clearly it's a very difficult time for them.
OK, for now, thank you. Rest of today's news for you now. Here's Gareth. Morning.
Good morning. Yes, lots of medical news to bring you up to speed on.
Absolutely.
Let's start with NHS dentistry, because the NHS has been battling a huge demand for dental services, leaving people queuing around the block. Now, the government's offering cash for patients, but many dentists say that's just not enough. Molly Malone has more.
This is the problem plain to see. NHS dentistry in demand. A queue which lasted hours. Patients waiting to sign up to a new dental practice in Bristol. Many of them had little luck.
And we were all told to leave and go home and come back the next day. I was shocked at how long a queue it was, and it just showed how important it was to people to be able to register for a dentist. I also met people who were saying things like they couldn't get their dentures repaired, so they'd use super glue, and somebody else who'd taken their own tooth out by their own means, which sounds really dangerous at best and certainly painful.
That's a situation the government are hoping to change. They're set to announce a £200 million investment for a dental service that's struggling. The proposals include a Golden Hello incentive payment of £20,000 to encourage dentists to work in remote, underserved areas, a bonus payment for taking on new NHS patients, mobile dental teams to visit schools, and advice for parents about healthy gums and milk teeth. But some dentists say the money will just be divided in a different way, without amounting to much.
NHS dentistry doesn't pay. I did a course of treatment on a patient pre-Christmas, and the laboratory charges for his work, so the crowns, the dentures that I made, and all the other stuff I did, that came to £600. The NHS actually paid me £360 to see that person. So I lost £240 out of my own pocket. Even if they put 200 million quid in, it's still not touching the sides. It's not a sticking plaster over a wound. It's someone waving a box of plasters at you as they run away out the door. It's that useless.
This is an extreme picture of a problem that has long persisted across the country. It's not yet clear whether the plans will simply polish or fix the issue at the root. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Well, at around 7:15, Kay will be joined by the chair of the British Dental Association's Principal Executive Committee, Eddie Crouch, and the former president of the British Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, Dr. Simon Chard. In other news, the United States Secretary of State has landed in Tel Aviv, hoping to push a new agreement over the line to pause the fighting and free more Israeli hostages. Antony Blinken's latest Middle East tour also took him to Egypt, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Qatari mediator Sheikh Hamas has given a generally positive response to the latest proposed truce with Israel. The campaign group River Action takes the government's Environment Agency to court later this morning over pollution in the River Wye. The river had its status downgraded to unfavourable last year, with activists blaming the pollution on the rapid expansion of chicken farming in the area. A Kenyan doomsday cult leader has been charged with the murder of almost 200 children. Prosecutors say Paul Mackenzie and his co-accused associates ordered followers to starve themselves and their children in order to enter heaven when the world apparently ends. Hundreds of bodies have been found buried in a forest. Accident investigators say a panel that blew off a Boeing jet last month was missing bolts that were supposed to hold it in place. It happened after the Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 took off from Portland, Oregon. The pilots managed to land the plane safely with a hole in its side. Parts of California, including Los Angeles, are bracing for more flooding, rain and mudslides. A so-called atmospheric river is funneling dense moisture inland from the Pacific Ocean, with the El Niño weather pattern contributing to the stormy weather. Women may need to work an extra 19 years to retire with the same pension savings as men. Research by Now Pensions says women end up with about £69,000 on average. That's compared with £205,000 for men. It points to career gaps, caring responsibilities and childcare costs as major factors. There's also been a jump in the amount needed to sustain a moderate lifestyle during retirement. That's due to the cost of living crisis.
In other news, there are calls on the government this morning to urgently set up financial assistance for thousands of people who've suffered serious harm from medical products. Our Home Affairs editor Jason Farrell spoke to some of the victims affected.
There's no way to put a value on what Natasha has lost due to a medical procedure on the NHS that has left her in agony.
Because it's a very sharp pain. It feels almost like I've got a piece of wood wedged in there.
Like a splinter?
Yeah, no, like a proper, like if you had a pencil, has been wedged in there.
Pelvic mesh implants were given to women to support internal organs after childbirth or a hysterectomy, but have left an estimated 10,000 people with disabilities as the mesh cut into their organs and nerves. For single mum Natasha, she's had to give up her cleaning business and is dependent on her 2 young daughters.
You know, I don't want them to be my carer. It's really hard when, you know, you're cooking tea and you have to get your 12-year-old to come out and lift something out of the oven for you. Seeing my neighbours take them on long walks or taking them kayaking, and all I get is the photographs at the end. It's taken our lives away.
Today, the Patient Safety Commissioner has proposed an urgent scheme to offer financial support to those damaged by mesh.
They said to me,
but also those harmed by the epilepsy drug Valparate.
The facial dysmorphia.
Patricia was on it for both of her pregnancies, not knowing it would cause her children to have autism and lifelong learning difficulties.
We're talking about reminding them how to use the toilet properly, washing their hands, drying their hands, having a wash, brushing their teeth. Things like this that children would have learned when they're very small, we're still having to do every day.
Then obviously...
Joseph is now 23, but still needs warning.
Right, wait, Joseph.
About crossing the road.
Make sure it's clear before you step out.
Our biggest worry is what will happen to our children when the time comes that we're not here to look after them.
It's more than 6 years since Sky News revealed that regulators knew back in the 1970s that Valparate posed a risk, but for years chose not to tell patients like Patricia. Today's review says patients expect an interim payment from the government of £100,000 for a valparate victim and £20,000 for mesh. That initial payment alone could come to £500 million, with a second sum proposed after a more detailed costing.
How quickly would you like them to respond?
Immediately. The need for redress is now. So I want the government to get on with it, to set up a scheme for patients and start making payments in 2025.
An independent review had recommended that 3 groups be given help. Primidos victims were also alleged to be damaged by a drug, but the government has excluded them from consideration.
Come on then.
But for mesh and valparate campaigners, the fight isn't over. The government still has to agree to the payments.
Yeah, I like the sound of the ocean.
Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Mary's with us, of course, this morning. Thoughts on this? Good morning.
Morning, Kay. Yes, so this is a really difficult subject and a really difficult scandal, really, when it comes to the victims affected by valparate, the epilepsy drug that was affecting mothers who were pregnant and it was impacting their children, but also the pelvic mesh, vaginal mesh that women were given after hysterectomies or after childbirth to essentially maintain their organs, and that ended up damaging their nerves or their organs. So essentially what's happening now is the Patient Safety Commissioner has written this report and she has recommended that there should be a compensation scheme in place, so about £100,000 as initial payment for those who took the sodium valparate and about £20,000 for those affected by the pelvic mesh. Now that's just the interim payment, just the first level of payments. Then she expects there to be a second level of payments and that will be assessed by need. So essentially that will be potentially a case-by-case basis. And the expectation, this is going to cost about £500 million if the government agrees to it. So a huge amount of money at a time when departmental budgets are very squeezed. We're talking a lot about different sections of the NHS that are under huge amounts of pressure, not least, for instance, dentistry we've seen over the past couple of days. And the report is expecting and hoping that those payments could start from 2025 to try and compensate and help those victims who've had such horrific experiences. Now, Women's Health Minister Maria Caulfield, who's actually a former nurse herself, has said that she's welcomed the report. She's going to look closely into the detail and respond in due course, but she says that she does have deep, deep sympathy for the victims. But will that be enough?
OK, for now, thanks so much indeed. OK, well, let me just have the full quote, should we, from the Health Minister. Here we go. Our sympathies remain with those affected by sodium valparate and pelvic mesh, and we are focused on improving how the system listens to patients and healthcare professionals, as well as introducing measures to make medicines and devices safer. I'm hugely grateful to the Patient Safety Commissioner and her team for their work on this important issue. The government is carefully considering the Patient Safety Commissioner's recommendations and will respond to the report fully in due course. Looking at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week will be colder than of late, with some wintry hazards, especially tomorrow. For now, it's frosty for many, but the far south is milder. Southern England will be rather cloudy through the morning, with showers affecting the southwest. Elsewhere, it's going to be mainly dry, with some hazy sunshine. But northern areas can expect showers with sleet and snow possible. Scotland looks most at risk. It'll be colder than recently, but less windy.
Good morning. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Let's talk more now about dentistry, should we? Joining us, Dr. Simon Chard, and also Eddie Crouch, Chair of the British Dental Association. Good to see you guys. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Where do we start with this? I was looking at some of those queues, people queuing around the block to get to be seen by a dentist. Is it a crisis?
Well, I think it's been brewing for quite a long time. You know, for possibly the last decade, ministers put this down to the pandemic, and that certainly has worsened the situation. But I can tell you that in my own city, in Birmingham, if they opened a new service like that and they asked people to come and register or come along and make appointments, probably have a queue just like that. And so we've got 12 million people looking for access to NHS dentistry. So what it visualised is just the sad state the service is currently in.
What's your experience, Dr?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the contract as it is currently is really inadequate. It's not encouraging the next generation of dentists to get involved with it. It's creating barriers for overseas dentists to come in and get trained up to work within it. And that's just leading to a complete lack of clinicians who can work within the service comfortably.
How much has been lost in real term cuts to NHS dentistry over the years, in your experience?
Well, the BDA did some analysis, and we believe about £500 million would be necessary to actually put the funding back to what it was a decade ago in real terms. So the additional 200 million that was announced yesterday, or was supposed to be announced today, probably won't do anything, because last year alone the underspend in dentistry was £500 million.
Why do you think it's become such an issue in the UK? Is it all about the funding?
Well, the system itself doesn't work. When you have a system that pays the same for 10 fillings as it does for 3, it makes it very difficult for the clinician themselves to work within that system and feel like they're being respected and supported in what can be a very difficult job. And what that's leading to is a huge amount of mental health issues, stress and burnout, which is far more proportionately shown in dentists that work in the NHS than those that work in the private sector, which is pushing, as I say, dentists out of the system to work in an area where they feel more fairly supported.
And does that give way, in some part, to poor dentistry on occasion?
Well, I think the treadmill of delivery and the target system that dentists are asked to work under is not conducive to good patient care. Many of my colleagues really struggle with that, and I'm amazed that some people actually deliver such high quality care even though the system is so bad.
To the extent, I mean, the governments say that they're investing, unfortunately we didn't speak to the Minister this morning, they say that they're investing a significant amount of money. You're saying it's not
It's
enough.
not new money.
No. OK, tell me more. Sorry, I will come to you in a sec.
Well, it's not new money because it's actually an allocation of the contracts that are already with the dental practice. So this is just making it easier for dentists who are struggling with that target to actually hit the target easier, because they were given some cash alongside the target to actually make it work.
And when you finally do see a patient, I'm guessing because they've waited so long, or they've put it off, or they can't get an appointment, or whatever, their teeth are in pretty bad condition.
Oftentimes, yes, and I think it's deeper than that. The government needs to be focusing more on prevention. When you've got a situation where the #1 cause of children going to hospital is to have their teeth taken out because of dental decay, something is significantly wrong with the way the system's being worked. And from what I've seen of the latest move today, it's not a reformatting of what's there. It's plastering up a system that's just not working and needs complete reform.
OK. It is true that youngsters are the #1 cause, I think, between 6 and 12 of kids going to have emergency treatment within the NHS A&E is because of the fact that they've got bad teeth.
Shocking, isn't it?
How can that be?
You know, it's absolutely shocking. And, you know, many things in health, obesity, diabetes, various other things, all related to sugar. We don't get decay unless you've had a significant amount of sugar in your diet. So it needs joined-up thinking, really. We need a preventative approach across the NHS, but certainly in dentistry.
OK, so what sort of advice can you give to parents to help their children not have rotting teeth?
Well, I mean, I've got 2 young kids myself, and I know how difficult it can be for parents to even get them to brush their teeth sometimes. So just really try to focus, as Eddie says, on looking for areas of sugar, whether they be obvious areas of sugar or hidden sugars in things like ketchup or baked beans. Do a full diet analysis. Try and make sure you're brushing your teeth twice a day for the children with a fluoride-based toothpaste. And really, that should be enough. As Eddie says, if there isn't sugar there, they won't get decay. And that's the key thing, really.
And your message to the government this morning?
Well, we've waited a long time for this recovery plan. It's been really frustrating, and sadly, it's very disappointing. We need more urgent action, and we need a reform of the contract.
OK. Good to see you both. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you, Prince William's set to return to public duties for the first time since the King's cancer diagnosis after the monarch spent the night at Sandringham. We'll have all the latest. Weather warnings for snow and ice come into effect. We'll look at where it'll be worst.
Your Majesty, you must try the slipper on Cinderella. Cinderella?
Oh, yes, it is. We'll meet Jefferson Parlett, who's become the first person to get a pantomime master's degree.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Coming up on The Breakfast Show for you, coming up, the panto-loving kid who grew up to get a pantomime master's degree. Oh, yes, he did.
Oh, no, he didn't.
Oh, yes, he did. He's behind you. And at 7:45, the battle to keep Asian hornets at bay. But first...
Our top stories this morning. A culture of misogyny and sexual harassment is evident within every trust across the 4 nations of the UK. That's according to the chief executive of the College of Paramedics. Sky News has spoken to paramedics who describe a daily culture of toxic harassment that in some cases turns into sexual assault. The King has spent the night at Sandringham after starting his treatment for cancer and holding a brief meeting with Prince Harry. The Duke of Sussex travelled from California to meet with his father. The government is planning to offer dentists cash incentives to take on more NHS services, as well as golden hello payments to work in underserved areas. The British Dental Association told us the money, though, won't even touch the sides. The government is being told to urgently set up financial assistance for thousands of people who've suffered serious harm from medical products. It's estimated about 20,000 babies have been born with disabilities due to fetal exposure to sodium valproate, while 10,000 women were injured by pelvic mesh implants.
Quick look at the papers with Mari. Good morning. Where should we start?
Morning, Kay. Well, we're going to start with the Metro. So, Harry, I'm here for you, Pa. That's the headline that reads on the front page of the Metro. Prince Harry's trip to see his dad after Charles announced his cancer diagnosis.
Go on, you do them.
And also, according on the Express as well, same story again. Harry's show of love for Cheers.
That's the Express.
Cheers of love.
There you go. That's a picture that we saw. It's the first time we've seen the King, actually, since his diagnosis. Yes. And he did have a procedure, we're told, on Monday. That's the first time we've heard that he had a procedure. I mean, one assumes, they said he's very tired now, that, you know, it could, it will be a treatment in relation to his cancer. Absolutely. Could be chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or whatever. But he's certainly gone to convalesce now in Sandringham. We're there from 8.
Yeah. Now, the Telegraph writes that their meeting lasted 30 minutes at Claren House. That's between Harry and King Charles as well.
Yep. Let's whiz through these, shall we? The Sun reporting that Charles waited to see Harry. The Mail, interestingly, a different time frame in the Mail, which says Charles and Harry met for 45 minutes before the King took off from Sandringham. I've been looking at the papers, and it's from Harry arrived at 2:45. And the King was leaving at 3:30. So that ain't no 45-minute chat there, is it?
No, it doesn't.
He literally was out the door. Hi, Harry, I'm glad you've flown 5,000 miles. Good to see you. The chopper's waiting. And off he went. The Times pointing out that the Duke has no plans to meet his brother, Prince William. Quelle surprise, as they say in Portugal. And the Mirror focuses on that picture of the King and Queen yesterday, saying he's putting on a brave face. Thoughts?
It's just a little bit sad, isn't it? The you know, 30
Families.
minutes. Families, I know, but you would think if one thing was to bridge the divide, bridge the gap, it might be this, and not going to see his elder brother. Is he staying? Is he going? Is he gone to Sandringham? It's just all a bit depressing.
I mean, I think it's just so normal. I think families are messy, families are full of drama, families have ups and downs, sometimes you fall out, sometimes you make up. I mean, it's actually just depressingly normal, if anything. And unfortunately, you know, a cancer scare like this, a diagnosis like this can bring people together, but nonetheless, it doesn't mean it's going to be this magical cure that's just going to completely disappear all of the disputes that have happened.
And then all played out through the long lens of the tabloid press as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways of looking at it, isn't there? Depends on your view of the royals, I suppose. I mean, the King, tearful, on the phone to Harry, hello, son, I know we've had our differences, but I've got cancer and it's not great. And Harry says, OK, I'm coming straight away. Now, does the King want him to come straight away, knowing that he's got to have some chemo or whatever it is, and then he's going to have to rest for a while because chemo takes it out of patients? I'm not saying it is chemo, but if it was, and he knows that he's having it on Monday because I'm sure he told him, gets on the plane anyway because he's desperate to see his dad, or some are suggesting getting on the plane because it's making a big fuss. And did the royals want Harry to come straight away? Pays your money, takes your choice.
I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because if Harry hadn't have come, he would have been accused of being heartless and, oh, you know, your dad's just told everyone they've got cancer and you haven't even bothered to come over.
Exactly.
So you can't win either way. I think, you know, you're always going to come under criticism.
Because the King's gone to Sandringham.
Yeah.
As I said, we'll be outside from 8 o'clock. What's Harry going to do? Because he's not going to see his brother, is he?
Doesn't sound like it.
No.
And that continued case, which just reminded me about against the government about his protection whilst he's in the UK as well.
And that was interesting yesterday, wasn't it?
Seeing those police cars escorting those vehicles through the airport, but that's obviously kind of a elephant in the room as well.
Yeah, I think the police escort was because they knew that the King only had a small window, and so they had to get him through the London traffic from West London as quickly as they could. That's my theory, anyway.
It's quite a good.
But you can. Do you like that one?
Yeah,
that's a good theory. Are you going with that theory?
I'll go with that theory.
Okay. Let's move on to other news for you now. We're going to be talking actually about the King's cancer diagnosis in more detail in just a few moments' time. Before that, though, we were talking about pantomimes, weren't we, earlier?
We certainly were. Lots of concern there.
Are you a pantomime fan?
I absolutely love pantomime, and actually, fun fact...
no, you don't.
Oh, yes, I do, Kay. Fun fact for you, I actually did joint honours French and theatre degree, so I am all about studying theatre, pantomime and all things dramatics.
Are you a pantomime fan?
I like the pantomime. My other half's Canadian, and
you never mention it.
No, but it's important because I thought everyone knew about the pantomime, and he loves it because it never grew up with it. So we go every year now because it's kind of.
Which is your favourite?
We went to one at Charing Cross Theatre, and it was for an over 18 audience only. That's all I can say, and it was very funny.
Which is your favourite one?
I saw a really good one of Snow White a couple of years ago in Birmingham, and it was fabulous. I love pantomimes. No offence to the South, but I love pantomimes in the Midlands and the North. I think the crowd are just better. They're just more lively. I love it.
Well, let's bring in Jefferson Parlett. He's earned himself the first master's degree in pantomime. He's with us now. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. You can hear what the team are thinking about pantomime. Which is your favourite pantomime?
It's a hard one because as part of the course, we looked at so many different titles. But if I had to choose one, it would have to be Mother Goose. Purely because it teaches kids so many life lessons about not being greedy, being grateful for what you've got, and it's just one of those feel-good family pantos.
OK. Tell Mari why she should have done more than... you said a theatre degree?
Yeah.
French and theatre. Yeah. But you did pantomime, purely pantomime. Why?
Well, I've always wanted to do pantomime. Ever since I was about 6, 7 years old, I wanted to be an actor. And my first experience of live theatre, like with a lot of children, was pantomime. But there was just no workshops, there was no training, there was no worthwhile developmental chances or opportunities. So as soon as I read about the Masters in Panto in the stage, I had to do it.
What do you say to that?
I mean, I think it's fascinating. I want to know what kind of reaction you get kind of on the international stage. Gareth was talking about how, you know, people in, for instance, Canada, they don't know what panto is. What's the reaction kind of outside of the UK when it comes to a panto degree?
To be honest, not a lot of people get it. Not a lot of people understand. People think I'm joking when I tell them. But I think pantomime is a quintessentially British tradition. Everyone in Britain recognises it. It's the lifeblood of our nation and one of the best things to come out of our country. So when you tell international audiences what panto is, they're not quite sure exactly because it is such a British thing.
I'm interested, you talk about kind of a quintessential tradition, the lifeblood of our cultural identity. How is it changing over the course of time?
I think people are being more cautious in terms of representation and inclusivity. I'll try that again. And inclusivity. I think there's a lot more stories to tell. I mean, with Panto, you can tell different points of view of stories. It can go anywhere. That's what's so great about Panto is it can be moulded and adapted and explored in very many different ways.
What's the course consist of, Jefferson?
So the first module looked at the historical background of Panto, how it developed from the Victorian age and how it took its influences from clowning. And then the second module looked at actual pantomime techniques. So we took routines such as the ghost gag. When you have the actors on stage, you have the ghost creeping in behind the actors on the stage and all the kids saying, "It's behind you." We actually looked at the mechanics of that stock routine and what it takes to execute that, to the point where you're getting the laughs. And then the third module, as you see from the clips, we got to direct, produce and write our own panto, and we took that to local communities around Staffordshire, and we got to invite producers to come along and watch.
It's great to see you, Jefferson. Good luck with your future career. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.
OK, you too. Thank you. When was the last time you went to a pantomime?
I went to it twice over the course of Christmas.
The 18th? You went to see it twice?
I'll tell you the headline of it once we're off air.
OK. When was the last time you went?
Very recently. I do at least 2 a year.
Yeah.
My husband's a massive fan. I'm a massive fan. I love Panto. I can't get enough. Can't get enough.
Have you ever been in one?
In a Panto? No, I've never. I've always done very serious stuff, unfortunately. Never say never, though.
No, exactly. There may well be an agent watching this morning. She's available for pantomimes and serious stuff as well.
Serious stuff as well,
yeah,
of course. Yeah.
Good. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you, going to be speaking to a beekeeper who's on the front line of the war against these nasty invaders. What are they? They are, well, it says on the screen. Let sleeping polar bears lie, the amateur British snapper who's won a big prize for this shot.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Wall Street! Wall Street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything, you know, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
It's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go. I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians. You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Wednesday morning, which can only mean that it's Prime Minister's Questions later on. Wilfred will be on air from 10. It's going to be another lively one, I'm sure. Wilfred, good morning.
Good morning to you, Kay. So we're going to be building up to PMQs, as you said. It's interesting. I had Sir Lindsay Hoyle on last week and was asking him about whether he'd like a slightly warmer tone to proceedings, which he was really quite clear about. I think that's wishful thinking. I also gave him a bit of grief, the fact he called Keir Starmer the Prime Minister once again, and whether the polls were getting to his head. So I'll be keeping an eye on Sir Lindsay Hoyle as well, whether he makes that error too. I'll be interested to see if we do get tributes or wishes of warm wishes to the King, of course, at the opening of PMQs. And also whether the Prime Minister tries to take a little bit of a victory lap as it relates to Northern Ireland and whether he tries to turn the conversation back to that. And doesn't that already, Kay, seem like weeks ago That was 2 days ago, but amazing how the stories move on so quickly.
Yeah, I had a cup of tea with the Speaker, actually, at the Speaker's quarters earlier on in the
no
week.
need to show off. I had to have him down the line in a camera interview.
It almost fell off the table before you caught it. Thankfully, you picked it up. And he was telling me that he wants Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, to be accountable to the House of Commons. And apparently there's a white line in what we are for pomp and circumstance in this country. There's a white line in the chamber. So being a Lord, he can't go and sit on the benches, but he could come to the white line, it's called the bar, and he could there be held accountable for his decisions and the decisions of the Prime Minister as it relates to overseas. But the government has that paperwork, apparently, and doesn't want to do anything about it at the moment.
Well, I think there's a bigger point here. Maybe, provided there's an election coming soon and he goes to select committees and it's a sort of temporary setup, can we all just sort of ignore it for a little bit? The question is really, will he stand to be an MP in the next general election, which I put to him when I interviewed him in December, and he sort of dodged it and said, no, I want to do this job for a long time but not be an MP. That seems to be unsustainable to me. You can't have an election, not bother to try and be elected and still remain one of the key cabinet ministers. Arguments for temporary expertise by putting someone in the cabinet for the Lords, but I think that's something they'll get pressure on as they approach the election if he's still Foreign Secretary and not standing to be a minister. By the way, international situation, we're discussing that as well. Blinken, of course, in Tel Aviv. Is he about to pull off some amazing deal after his whirlwind tour of the other Middle East countries? We'll see.
We certainly will. And if truth be told, I actually went to see Maggie, but she was in the bath in Chorley. So if you know, you know. Do you know who Maggie is?
Do you know what? I didn't hear what you just said there, Kay. There was an issue.
I said I went to see Maggie, actually, at the Speaker's house, but she was in the bath in Chorley. Maybe it's because I said bath, you didn't understand what I was saying.
No, it's not. It definitely is not that. But there we go. Well, again, another worthy side story of detail, Kay, and I look forward to many more.
Do you know who she is?
I'm kind of being lost on this. This is not a reference to Maggie Thatcher. No, you're talking. Well,
So
when you went to see Lindsay,
she's named after Maggie Thatcher, yeah, but she's actually a tortoise.
There we go. Amazing. Well, God, Maggie needs to be much more famous. Why is Larry the cat taking all the fame? Maggie the tortoise.
Exactly. And he's got a parrot called Boris as well, and he's got a cat as well. And I've forgotten the name of the cat. What's the name of the cat? She's not there. I'll try and remember the name of the cat, and I'll tell you in the next hour. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, Kay. See you in a bit.
See you in a bit. Now, an ecological disaster waiting to happen. That's how beekeepers are summing up the threat of invading Asian hornets. Joining us now is Julian Newton, the Asian Hornet Coordinator at Laddington and District Beekeepers Association. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. What are Asian hornets and why are we so worried about them?
OK, Asian hornets are an invasive species. They arrived in France in 2004 and they're all over France now. Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Holland. And last year they arrived on the south coast. The National Bee Unit, the NBU, had destroyed 72 nests. Our worry is that queens have emerged from the nests before they were destroyed.
What's the issue with them, though? Why do we not want them here? I thought all bees were good for the environment.
Because they eat pollinators. A mature nest will eat 12.5 kilos of bees and other pollinators. When they find a hive, they will destroy it. They eat everything.
What's your experience with them so far, Julian?
I have no personal experience. They haven't reached this part of Kent yet. But the guys down on the south coast in Capel-le-Fern, Folkestone, they lost hives last year. So as an Asian Hornet Coordinator, we've started a spring trapping program. The 16 clubs in Kent are coordinating trapping to catch queens. That's just queens. They hibernate over the winter and emerge in the spring, and they start a little nest called a primary, and then around June time they start a secondary nest, and that's when all the damage is done to the pollinators.
And what can be done to sort this out?
Say again?
What can be done to sort this out?
What we need mostly is public awareness. If you see one of these things, report it. There's an Asian Hornet Watch app, which is available for Android and iOS. If you go on there, it's got some good pictures, help you identify it. If you suspect you've seen one, then you report it, and then the NBU and beekeepers will endeavour to find it and catch it.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for alerting us to that. We appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Now, the act of falling asleep doesn't normally win awards, but snapping a photograph of a young polar bear drifting off on an iceberg might land you a top photography prize. This image by Nima Sarikani has won the Wildlife Photographer of the Year People's Choice Award, held up as a visual representation of the impacts of climate change. He searched for polar bears near Norway's Svalbard for 3 days before finding this male carving a bed for himself in the ice. And a photo of a cheeky-looking interaction between a turtle and a dragonfly was also highly commended. Yeah, I think he was trying to eat it. He had a slightly longer neck. I think that's what was going on there. More snow and ice are on the way. Morning.
Morning, yes. Talking snow and ice. But it's been mild, hasn't it? It was 14 degrees yesterday in the south, you know, double digits. But yes, we've seen that colder air sinking south yesterday, and then we've got the milder air, the colder air, and it's trying to battle out across the UK on Thursday, bringing some snow. So yes, there'll be snow for some of us, not for all of us. Heavy rain in the south, unfortunately.
Where's the snow going to be, and how thick is it going to be?
So for Thursday's snowfall, there will be some snowfall today, mainly across Scotland. But for Thursday, we're looking at the central areas of the UK. So southern Scotland, northern England, North Wales, even down into the North Midlands and then Northern Ireland as well. So we could see a covering 2 to 5 centimetres at low levels. But it's the higher ground, that's where we could see significant amounts building across the Pennines, North Wales, could see up to 20 centimetres of snow. So yes, some significant snow possible, but it's going to be an awkward mix. For some, it might be rain. So yeah, it's a tricky one to forecast.
Yeah. I'm going to be in the Cotswolds at the weekend. Is it going to be snowing there?
No, it's that battle between the milder and colder air. I know, yes, no. Unfortunately, it looks like the milder air will win out, and so it won't be quite as cold.
OK, let's see what it's going to do for the rest of us. Thanks, Jo.
Yeah.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Rest of the week, colder than recently with some wintry hazards, especially tomorrow. For now, it's frosty for many, but the far south is milder. Southern England will be rather cloudy through the morning, with showers affecting the southwest. Elsewhere, it's going to be mainly dry with some hazy sunshine, but northern areas can expect showers with sleet and snow possible. Scotland looks most at risk.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Have you ever run a marathon?
I have not. I signed up for a marathon once, paid my dues, and then decided that was a terrible idea. So never finished it.
Run a marathon?
Absolutely not, Kay.
I can't see the point.
No way.
What about running a marathon with a fridge on your back? Check this out. That's Daniel Fairbrother. He hopes to break the world record. Who knew there was a world record for carrying a fridge on your back for a marathon? But there is. It has to be more than 25 kilos.
OK, fair enough. I mean, that's a huge amount of weight to carry on your back and to run, not just to walk, to run.
Yeah, I can't run across the road with my rucksack on.
No way.
No, and this follows a long line of bonkers marathon records. I'm just looking at one here. Fastest marathon wearing armour. Think of the chafing. 6 hours, 46 minutes, 59 seconds. Why? A marathon's hard enough. Why do it with a fridge on your back or an armour? Or dressed as a Viking, or dressed as a jester, or the most marathons done on crutches?
Well, he's actually doing it to raise money for his friend who has type 1 diabetes. And he's not only raising awareness, but also raising a significant amount of money. And the fridge has got a name.
Oh, really?
Yes. You've seen it on autocue.
Oh, OK, I have seen it on autocue. It's called Tallulah. Based on the Cool Runnings.
Exactly,
Sled.
which is why we were using that music. Have you seen Cool Runnings?
I have not. No. Oh, gosh, your faces. Oh, no. It's going to be one of those moments, isn't it? I have not seen that film. I'm so sorry. I'm so
Mari.
What are you doing on your honeymoon? You could have been watching Cool
I'm really
Runnings.
watching
You could have been watching
I've
Cool
got
Runnings.
better things to be doing than watching films in Mexico, Gareth. No, I haven't seen that film. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, you should. Okay. It's a very... You know what it's about?
No. I'm assuming it's about running, right?
No.
Oh.
OK.
It's just getting
Mari's
worse.
not available for the rest of the programme. We've got other things to... do you a quick rundown.
On the fridge note, though, I would say...
Back to fridges.
Remember, as journalists,
Safer
remember learning
ground.
shorthand. I remember learning shorthand, and best thing way
Were
to
you
learn...
Pitman or T-line?
I was T-line.
Yeah.
And the best way to pass the shorthand exam was to go the faster than you're actually going to go. So 100 words per minute, you would do 110.
That's exactly
and then
right.
it would get easier. So I think the fridge also makes you faster, because then when you let the fridge go, my gosh, you must be so fast. So it might be a training method as well. I feel there's like a method to the
You
madness.
should sell this to the Royal Marines or the SAS.
Don't help her.
I'm hanging my head in shame.
Coming up in the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about the situation that the King has found himself in. He's gone to Sandringham to convalesce after the shock news that he has contracted cancer. He is undergoing treatment as we speak. We're being told by Buckingham Palace that he had a course of treatment on Monday. His son came in to see him, and he has now gone to convalesce at Sandringham. We're there live, coming up very shortly. Morning, everybody. It is 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, we'll bring you the very latest on the King's health.
Plus, a call on the government to compensate patients damaged by the epilepsy drug valproate and vaginal mesh. A special report from our home editor, Jason Farrell.
Plus, we've got a provocative thought for a Wednesday morning. Has feminism done more harm than good? Some Gen Zers think so. We'll debate that
Or is it
in
Gen
half an hour.
Zers?
Gen Z, Gen Z, either or. Potato, potato.
Exactly, tomato, tomato. Wednesday, 7th of February. What next for the King as he appears in public for the first time since his shock cancer diagnosis and has a very brief visit with Prince Harry? Well, live at Sandringham shortly. His Majesty spent the night there after flying by helicopter from Buckingham Palace late yesterday. Revealed the allegations of a toxic culture of sexual assault and misogyny in the ambulance service. Sky News investigates.
I think they thought that because they were in a green uniform, they could get away with it.
Rotten plan dentists hit out after the government promises cash for new patients to help people like this queuing get access. We'll tell you why.
It's not a sticking plaster over a wound. It's someone waving a box of plasters at you as they run away out the door. It's that useless.
Weather warnings after the last extra cold snap. Our meteorologist will be with us to tell you where the worst will be.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone.
Plus, inspired by the movie Cool Runnings, we'll be joined by the man who runs marathons with a fridge on his back. He and his fridge will be with us. Morning, everyone. The King has spent the night at Sandringham after starting his treatment for cancer and holding a rather brief meeting with Prince Harry. Let's get more, should we? Laura is outside Sandringham for us this morning, half an hour, 45 minutes. You can speculate as to what amount of time Harry and the King spent together, but after a 5,000-mile journey, it wasn't very long, was it?
I don't think, Kay, we can read too much into the length of time of that meeting, purely because if they were arriving here by helicopter, the light is fading fast. So I think the fact that this meeting took place at all is of some significance, isn't it? I mean, we know Prince Harry and the King haven't spoken in person for months and months, barely saw each other at the coronation. So I think it is significant that Harry made that journey as soon as the announcement came in that the King had been diagnosed with cancer. There was news from California very quickly that Harry had spoken to his father that he'd be coming to the UK in the coming days, and that's exactly what we saw play out yesterday. Harry took what would have been pretty much the first flight over, making his way straight from Heathrow Airport to Clarence House, where they had that meeting. So, it wasn't a long meeting, but I think it is certainly a positive sign. The same definitely cannot be said for Prince William and Prince Harry. We're told very clearly that there are no plans for those two brothers to meet. So we have had one royal reunion. Does it mean it's a reconciliation? I think that's definitely not expected at the moment, but it does feel positive. Prince William, we're going to see him back out and again returning to royal duties. The red boxes will be arriving here at Sandringham for the King. This, I think, Kay, is the new normal now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously helicopters can fly in the dark. You could also have jumped on the chopper with him. But hey, who knows what's going on as far as the royal family is concerned. What will Harry do next, though? Is he heading straight back to LA to his family? Have we got any clues?
We haven't. Look, he won't be taking part in any official duties. There's no sign that everyone's stepping up and will include Harry. He is expected to be here for a little bit. He's got engagements, we think, in America next week. It's not off the cards that he couldn't have a second meeting with his father, but as ever with Harry, we simply don't know, and he will want to control the narrative, want to control, we hear about what he's up to. But for now, we understand he's spent the night in a hotel in central London.
Oh, OK. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Special Sky News investigation now. Rachel's here to tell us more. Morning.
Good morning, Kay. Yes, I have spent months speaking to current and former female paramedics who've described to me a really toxic-sounding culture of sexual harassment, inappropriate comments, jokes, behaviour, and in some extreme cases, sexual assault as well, that they say is riddled through the ambulance service, we're told, across the United Kingdom. It's clearly a culture that goes back decades and which some reports have said puts the safety of women at risk and also potentially even the safety of patients as well. And just a warning for anyone watching, this report contains some quite graphic details of sexual harassment, assault, and also self-harm and suicide as well.
They joined the ambulance service because they wanted to help people. But Sky News has spoken to female paramedics who say they found a culture there plagued by misogyny and sexual harassment. Freya says she put up with it for years, until one day a colleague locked her in the back of an ambulance and sexually assaulted her.
He just put his hand straight down my top. I was like, yeah, in shock. I couldn't move. I didn't know how to react. I just froze, absolutely froze. And if that wasn't enough, he then took my breast out and put my breast in his mouth. He took his pen and he drew a smiley face above and below my nipple. I just remember going into the station immediately when we got back, and I washed and scrubbed myself.
The trauma led Freya to try to amputate her breast and attempt to take her own life. She's received compensation from the trust and no longer works as a paramedic. After students started coming forward to complain about their experiences of sexual harassment, the College of Paramedics began an investigation.
We have found that our female student council members are experiencing misogyny and sexual harassment, if not on a daily, on a weekly basis, by a minority of people who just feel that that behaviour is acceptable. Sometimes that progresses to a really difficult space where I won't sign you off until maybe you come out for a date with me, or I won't sign you off until you send me a picture of yourself.
Laura is a newly qualified paramedic. She says women in the ambulance service are forced to put up with jokes and sexualising comments disguised as banter.
It's exhausting coming to work, dealing with inappropriate behaviour and sexual comments. It's awful. I actually look forward to the winter months where it's colder, where I can wear my jacket more often so that I'm more covered up. We've got the same uniform, you know, we've got a standardised unisex uniform, and I shouldn't have to feel like I'm being objectified and looked up and down by my colleagues, but that is the case.
An NHS spokesperson said any form of sexual misconduct is completely unacceptable, and that every ambulance trust in England has committed to a plan which commits to improving sexual safety. A number of culture reports in recent years have highlighted the open secret of sexual harassment. But victims want that secret to now be fully understood and finally dealt with.
Well, as you heard at the end of the report there have been a number of cultural reviews in recent years, some of them really damning into individual trusts that have highlighted this problem. The NHS will say that they're aware of it. You heard that statement again there, that they are changing, that there are plans in place to improve the sexual safety. But as recently as October, there was a report by the Association of Ambulance Chief Executives which described sexual harassment in some areas of the ambulance service as something as deemed acceptable and even a rite of passage. So this is something that is happening right now. The female paramedics I spoke to all say they loved their jobs, or they love their jobs if they're still in it. They want to see this improved so that women don't suffer what they have suffered in the future and that they stay in the career that they fought so hard for.
OK, for now, thanks so much indeed. If you or anyone you know needs help from the issues in this story, you can call the Samaritans 116 123, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. More news now, not least what's going on with dentistry in this country.
Yes, lots of health stories this morning. Let's pick up on that because the NHS has been battling a huge demand for dental services, leaving people queuing around the block. The government is offering cash now for patients, but many dentists say it's just not enough. Molly Malone has more.
This is the problem plain to see. NHS dentistry in demand. A queue which lasted hours. Patients waiting to sign up to a new dental practice in Bristol. Many of them had little luck.
and we were all told to leave and go home and come back the next day. I was shocked at how long a queue it was, and it just showed how important it was to people to be able to register for a dentist. I also met people who were saying things like they couldn't get their dentures repaired, so they'd use super glue, and somebody else who'd taken their own tooth out by their own means, which sounds really dangerous at best and certainly painful.
That's a situation the government are hoping to change. They're set to announce a £200 million investment for a dental service that's struggling. The proposals include a Golden Hello incentive payment of £20,000 to encourage dentists to work in remote, underserved areas, a bonus payment for taking on new NHS patients, mobile dental teams to visit schools, and advice for parents about healthy gums and milk teeth. But some dentists say the money will just be divided in a different way, without amounting to much.
NHS Dentistry doesn't pay. I did a course of treatment on a patient pre-Christmas, and the laboratory charges for his work, so the crowns, the dentures that I made, and all the other stuff I did, that came to £600. The NHS actually paid me £360 to see that person. So I lost £240 out of my own pocket. Even if they put 200 million quid in, it's still not touching the sides. It's not a sticking plaster over a wound. It's someone waving a box of plasters at you as they run away out the door. It's that useless.
This is an extreme picture of a problem that has long persisted across the country. It's not yet clear whether the plans will simply polish or fix the issue at the root. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Should have won.
Well, earlier, Kay spoke to Dr. Simon Chard. He said NHS funding guidelines have left dentists like him feeling there's no support.
It makes it very difficult for the clinician themselves to work within that system and feel like they're being respected and supported in what can be a very difficult job. And what that's leading to is a huge amount of mental health issues, stress and burnout, which is far more proportionately shown in dentists that work in the NHS than those that work in the private sector, which is pushing, as I say, dentists out of the system to work in an area where they feel more fairly supported.
The campaign group River Action takes the government's Environment Agency to court later this morning. That's over pollution in the River Wye. The river had its status downgraded to unfavourable last year, with activists blaming the pollution on the rapid expansion of chicken farming in the area. The Mayor of London has called for extra funding for the Metropolitan Police to deal with XL bully dogs. Now, new protective measures have come into force. Sadiq Khan has urged ministers to cover the cost of the work, as the force already faces a £240 million shortfall. Women may need to work an extra 19 years to retire with the same pension savings as men. Research by Now Pensions says women end up with about £69,000 on average, compared with £205,000 for men. It points to career gaps, caring responsibilities and childcare costs as major factors. There's also been a jump in the amount needed to sustain a moderate lifestyle during retirement. That's due to the cost of living crisis.
Jason's here with us again. He's going to be talking in more detail about the government being told to set up an emergency fund of around £500 million support for people who suffered serious harm from medical products. Chat to you in a second after his report.
There's no way to put a value on what Natasha has lost due to a medical procedure on the NHS that has left her in agony.
Because it's a very sharp pain. It feels almost like I've got a piece of wood wedged in there.
Like a splinter?
Yeah, no, like a proper, like if you had a pencil, has been wedged in there.
Pelvic mesh implants were given to women to support internal organs after childbirth or a hysterectomy, but have left an estimated 10,000 people with disabilities as the mesh cut into their organs and nerves. For single mum Natasha, she's had to give up her cleaning business and is dependent on her 2 young daughters.
You know, I don't want them to be my carer. It's really hard when, you know, you're cooking tea and you have to get your 12-year-old to come out and lift something out of the oven for you. Seeing my neighbours take them on long walks or taking them kayaking and all I get is the photographs at the end. taken our lives away.
Today, the Patient Safety Commissioner has proposed an urgent scheme to offer financial support to those damaged by mesh,
They said to me,
but also those harmed by the epilepsy drug valproate.
the facial dysmorphia.
Patricia was on it for both of her pregnancies, not knowing it would cause her children to have autism and lifelong learning difficulties.
We're talking about reminding them how to use the toilet properly, washing their hands, drying their hands, having a wash, brushing their teeth. Things like this that children would have learned when they're very small, we're still having to do every day.
Then obviously...
Joseph is now 23, but still needs warning
Right, wait, Joseph.
about crossing the road.
Make sure it's clear before you step out.
Our biggest worry is what will happen to our children when the time comes that we're not here to look after them.
It's more than 6 years since Sky News revealed that regulators knew back in the 1970s that valproate posed a risk, but for years chose not to tell patients like Patricia. Today's review says patients expect an interim payment from the government of £100,000 for a valproate victim and £20,000 for mesh. That initial payment alone could come to £500 million, with a second sum proposed after a more detailed costing.
How quickly would you like them to respond?
Immediately. The need for redress is now. So I want the government to get on with it, to set up a scheme for patients and start making payments in 2025.
An independent review had recommended that 3 groups be given help. Primidos victims were also alleged to be damaged by a drug, but the government has excluded them from consideration.
Come on then.
But for mesh and valproate campaigners, the fight isn't over. The government still has to agree to the payments.
Yeah, I like the sound of the ocean.
Well, I think what's interesting about this is that 4 years ago, the Cambridge Review came out calling for this redress, and the government actually said that they weren't going to offer redress to the victims of valproate, mesh or primidos. But they seem to have shifted a little bit, and they said to the Patient Safety Commission, which is a new role, look into this, see how it would work. And the Patient Commissioner said to the government, I'm not going to do this work unless you agree, that you will set up some kind of scheme of redress, because otherwise what's the point of doing the work? So she is handing this report over to a government who she expects to respond in some way. But these are big figures. £500 million as the interim payment is what's calculated from the figures they have in the report. She's not actually recommending a figure, but she's saying, look, here are the figures of what people say this is costing them thus far. And then when you look at valproate victims, all their lives ahead of them, there's huge costs there. So will the government stomach it? I think that is a big question. And the other big question is, why did they leave primidos out of this when that was initially also one of the groups that the Cambridge Review said needed redress? So far, they've been ignored, and they're angry about that.
I'm sure. Vinay, thanks very much indeed. Well, we asked the government for a statement. This is what they said. Our sympathies remain with those affected by sodium valproate and pelvic mesh, and we are focused on improving how the system listens to patients and healthcare professionals, as well as introducing measures to make medicines and devices safer. I'm hugely grateful to the Patient Safety Commissioner and her team for their work on this important issue. The government is carefully considering the Patient Safety Commissioner's recommendations and will respond to the report fully in due course. Quick look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week will be colder than of late, with some wintry hazards, especially tomorrow. For now, it's frosty for many, but the far south is milder. Southern England will be rather cloudy through the morning, with showers affecting the southwest. Elsewhere, it's going to be mainly dry with some hazy sunshine, but northern areas can expect showers with sleet and snow possible. Scotland looks most at risk, colder than recently, but less windy.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So Chris Bryant with us this morning. Let's talk about the King first, if we may. You had your own battle with cancer. Thoughts for him this morning?
Well, obviously, I hope everything goes well for him. And
It's been interesting watching the news because I've felt a bit, all right, everybody calm down. Cancer isn't a death sentence. It's obviously, you need to take it very, very seriously, but in the vast majority of cases, people are treated swiftly, they're dealt with, and they can return to full health. So I think we should all calm down. But I also think that if I had advice to anybody who's been watching the news, I remember, for me, the day I had my diagnosis, which is 5 years ago now, the worst day was that first night. I didn't sleep the first night. The second night, I slept a little bit better, but not much. And it does get better. And as long as you're in the right hands, you're getting the right treatment, and preferably if you go early enough to the doctor so it gets caught soon enough, you should be fine.
How challenging is the treatment?
Well, I don't know what treatment
he's in your experience.
In getting. Well, so my treatment, they cut a great big chunk out of the back of my head, as you know.
Yeah.
And then they put me on targeted therapy. I had melanoma, stage 3 melanoma, and as you know, they said to me that I had a 40% chance of living a year. So that's 5 years ago. That was all very frightening, and I'm still here. I mean, the thing about cancer, I suppose, is, as the many people who are on the who will be watching will say, is that you never quite feel as if you're out of the woods. It's always sort of there at the back, well, literally at the back of my head.
Yeah.
And you do just kind of wonder what might happen again in the future. I mean, the amazing thing for me is the melanoma I had in 5 years ago, if I'd had it 5 years previously, would have killed me, almost certainly. But the science has moved on so dramatically, and that's true of prostate cancer and lots of other cancers as well, that people stand a much better chance of surviving. I'd like us to have a better chance of getting people straight into treatment as fast as possible, and I'd like us, you know, it's good that, I don't know whether you get the bowel cancer thing that you get sent through the post. And
we are of that age, I'm afraid.
But you can't be, Kay.
Oh, yes.
Oh, all that makeup.
Right, let's get to the serious... Oh, God, sorry.
All I was saying is that it's really important to go if you've got worries.
Yeah.
You know, my thing is about skin cancer, and I just say, if you're ever in doubt about a mole, please, there's a great app you can use, which is sponsored by Melanoma Focus, a charity which I've been involved in. And there's one other thing I'd say to anybody who is given a cancer diagnosis. Don't use Dr. Google.
Oh, no.
It's really, really unhelpful. It can send you spare, especially because a lot of the material on there is very out of date, may not relate to UK, and so you only go to very reliable sites. In relation to melanoma, always go to Melanoma Focus. That's the end of my advert for Melanoma Focus.
And have a positive attitude. It goes a long way, is what...
Well, no. So actually, I don't like that argument.
Well, are we going to argue about it?
Yes. Because
Go
I think,
on, then.
well, so sometimes people
think...
think...
This is not what we were here to talk about, but let's do it.
Well, no, because I think sometimes people think that if you have cancer, the thing is that you've got to be positive. Well, it may not be easy to be positive, and you have to ride the waves a little bit. Of course, your mental health is a really important part of it. And if I might gently say to the media, in relation to the royal family, it probably isn't all that helpful to be banging on about all the other members of the family.
OK. My sister is presently going through chemotherapy. She has a triple negative breast cancer, which is very aggressive. And the nurse...
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. The nurse told her positive mental attitude goes a very long way when it comes to the treatment.
But you can't feel guilty about not feeling positive.
No,
that's all I'm saying.
She's much stronger than I am anyway, my sister, so she's amazing. She's got it.
I hope she'll be fine.
Thank you. So do I. Do you welcome the government's dentistry plan?
Well, yes, but it's far, far, far too late, and frankly, it's a temporary filling.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. No, it's a serious point. You know, the biggest reason for 6 to 10-year-olds going to hospital at the moment is tooth decay. We've seen the situation in Bristol with hundreds of people queuing up because they might have a chance of signing up to a new NHS dental practice. Lots of people, I think 8 out of 10 dental practices said last year that they had treated somebody who had tried to do self-dentistry, you know, pulling out their own teeth. The dangers of sepsis and all sorts of other problems are enormous. So, you know, this has been a problem that everybody's known about, everybody in the country. That when you saw that queue in Bristol, most people would have well, I'd have joined that queue if I'd have known. because there's so many people in the country desperate to join an NHS dental practice. It feels like we've got a three-tier system. That we've got the people who can afford to go private, we've got the people who can't afford to go private but have to, and then you've got people who are, you know, trying to get on an NHS practice or unable to proceed.
The sugar doesn't help, and I know that if you are in power, you want to deal with that sort of issue when it comes particularly to kids.
So first of all, we've got to make sure that kids brush their teeth properly, and we put forward a plan 6 months ago to do that. The Tories poo-pooed it, said it was the nanny state, but actually it's one of the important things that we need to do, and in fact the government, I think, have now announced that they're going to do something similar. The one thing that the government has patently failed to do is renegotiate the dental contract with dentists. That's the one thing that is absolutely essential. They said they were going to do it in 2010, and they still haven't done it after 14 years. It's one of the many parts of the NHS where they have manifestly failed this country, and it makes me angry.
OK. Talk to me about your £28 billion Green Pledge. Where are we with that? What on earth is happening?
We are doing it.
When?
We're doing it in the next Parliament.
OK. Towards the end of the next Parliament?
I can't tell you a precise day of the week and what month it's going to be, but our determination, our plan, our intent is to get it done. Now, you know, of course, it won't be on day one, because you can't wave a wand and suddenly create a British energy company.
Will it be 28 billion?
It will be 28 billion.
Because Sam Coates has done the maths, and he can only get it to, at best, between 17 and 18 billion a year.
I don't know what that's based on. I'm happy to go over it. But look, well, the important thing is the outcomes that we're trying to secure. So we want to create great British energy so that British people own their own...
If you give us figures and you say, this is what we're going to stand by, and then we challenge you, you have to be able to come back and say, yeah, but this, this and this.
I accept all of that, and I'll go through that in just 1 second. But my gentle question to the UK is...
I do the questions.
Yeah, well, I'm going to throw one back at you as well. The present government, they are still the government now, their plans for spending next year have a £20 billion hole in them.
Not asking about them.
No, but it's an important point. You're now asking me about what spending we will do in 2028, 2029.
Policies that you keep banging on about.
And our policy, Kay, and I've said it as clearly as I can, is that we intend to create the Great British Energy. We intend to deal with the insulation problem affecting millions of homes in the country. We want to create the jobs that are essential, and we want to reduce our carbon footprint. We have priced that so far at £28 billion, and we intend to do it. Keir Starmer said so yesterday, and that's our intention.
He said depending on fiscal rules.
Well, look, the one thing that is absolutely common sense for any government before we get into government, when we still don't even know this year how much the government is going to spend next year on public services, or for that matter, what the tax rates will be at the end of this year, of course we've got to bear in mind the state of the economy that was at the end of this year.
So why give us a figure then if you don't know?
Because I'm saying this is our intention. This is what we want to do. This is what we are determined to do. This is what we will do. However, my only caveat, and it's just being commonsensical, is that we don't know what the state of the finances will be at the end of this year. We don't even know whether the general election will be on May the 2nd or will be in November sometime. I hope it's in May. Then we'll be able to give much more clarity much sooner.
But it might not be 28 billion then.
Kate, you're trying very hard and you're doing very well.
I know you find me very trying.
No, I don't. I love you to death, but this is our intention. This is what we're going to do. I don't know how I could be any clearer.
It's great to see you as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, we heard from the leader, Keir Starmer, actually. Yesterday, he was talking about this. And he also underlined, as Sir Chris did just then, that 28 billion is the plan. But he did throw in that caveat as well, depending on fiscal rules. As we were saying, Sam Coates has been looking at the figures for us, Mari, and he can't get it to 28 billion.
Yeah, exactly. So Sam Coates has tried to crunch the numbers, and he says there's about rough, give or take 10 billion or so still missing in terms of how all of these different subsections of that 28 billion are allocated. And Chris Bryant there, adamant to you, wasn't he?
Adamant, yeah.
Absolutely adamant that
in
it's
his own
happening.
special way.
Yes, of course. Absolutely adamant and really, really firm with you about it. It's definitely happening. It's definitely happening. It's going to be 28 billion. That's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure. But We still don't quite know what's going on with that missing 10 billion. And therefore, until they clear that up, there's still going to be a lot of questions. There's lots of reporting and speculation about Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves not seeing eye to eye on this. Chris Bryant, very, very clear to you. It's not the case. There's nothing to see here. It is absolutely happening. How long will that last?
OK, we'll see. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. Is the next generation being taught feminism is dangerous? We'll look at how social media is impacting gender views. And the threats of coastal erosion and how to stop it. We'll speak to an expert in geology and geohazards. And why the shot of a polar bear has gone viral.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors. I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it. Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone. I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Hello again, everybody watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. If you were with us in the last half hour, you'll have seen that our royal correspondent's outside Sandringham, where the King is, and she was making the point that Harry and the King had about half an hour or so together yesterday, and she thought that was quite a significant amount of time, given the light was fading and he needed to get on a chopper and stuff. What do you think? That's what I thought.
I think there's always other ways you could have got there. There's a royal train, there's cars, there's various other ways you could have done it. And if they wanted more time, I think the helicopter potentially is a useful mechanism for having a bit of a... Oh, the family's coming around.
Isn't there a free seat in a helicopter?
Well, precisely, could have gone with him. I understand the points that Laura was making, but I don't necessarily subscribe to that thought of process myself.
I think, though, if you've got a strained relationship, maybe 30 minutes is enough just as a starting point when you can say, I'm here now, I'm in the country, I'm here if you need me, and then you can work your way up from that. But maybe if there has been some difficulty between the two of them, that might be a good starting point, just a short...
Yeah, he's travelled 5,000 miles. You sit him down. Have you had something to eat? Do you want a cup of tea? How are the kids? Blah.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree.
I thought so. There's always a first for everything.
Well, let's remind you, though, of the top stories this morning. A culture of misogyny and sexual harassment is evident within every trust across the 4 nations of the UK. That's according to the Chief Executive of the Royal College of Paramedics. Sky News has spoken to paramedics who describe a daily culture of toxic harassment that in some cases turns to sexual assault. The government is planning to offer dentists cash incentives to take on more NHS services, as well as golden hello payments to work in underserved areas. The British Dental Association told Sky News, though, the money won't even touch the sites. The government's being told to urgently set up financial assistance for thousands of people who've suffered serious harm from medical products. It's estimated about 20,000 babies have long-term disabilities. That's following fetal exposure to sodium valproate, while 10,000 women were injured by pelvic mesh implants.
Here's a question for you this morning. What's your view on feminism? Lucy Ballantyne, campaigns manager at the Fawcett Society, and Albi Amankona, broadcaster and conservative commentator, is here as well. Apparently, there's a new report suggesting that Gen Z are more likely than older baby boomers to believe in feminism, doing more harm than good.
Yeah, I think we're really experiencing now a period of backlash, which I think feminists are sort of used to, you know. I think that's a term that was coined by Susan Faludi back in the 90s. We know that feminism popularity goes up, popularity goes down, and wherever there's progress, there's pushback. And, you know, we remember 10 or so years ago, the question on everyone's lips was, is so-and-so a feminist? Is X celebrity a feminist? And that's because we were sort of emerging from a period of backlash. And I think that that word had some cachet. And that sort of we successfully emerged from that period of backlash, and we're starting to experience that period of backlash again.
Where are you, Albi, on that?
I think what's interesting about this backlash is where the backlash is happening from, i.e. it's happening, it would appear, with younger men from the Gen Z cohort, the 16 to 29 cohort. And usually you would expect people to become more progressive and more liberal the younger they go down the age scale. But there seems to be a change specifically with Gen Z, which hasn't happened with millennials, by the way. And so then we've got to think, why is this happening? Now, there are a couple of theories around this. I think one of the main ones which is going around is you have this entire generation of young men who have been told by mainstream society almost that their masculinity is toxic, that they are the problem, that we live in a patriarchal society and all the problems of society stem from patriarchy. Now, if you just tell...
generalisation.
Well, this is what is going on out there. This is how young men feel. And if that is how young men feel, we shouldn't be surprised when they go towards people who are telling them that, no, they're not the problem. Actually, they're the solution. There is good in masculinity. There's nothing wrong with having fun with the lads. So you get these people like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson filling the void that mainstream society should be filling by telling these young people, actually, all right, there are some issues of disparities between men and women, but you aren't the problem, actually, you're part of the solution.
Aren't baby boomer mothers filling those gaps and telling their young boys who are 16 to 29, my son's 30, that, you know, feminism has its place, but you've also got a place, son, and you need to flourish in whichever society you want to live in?
Yeah, I think what is really interesting about that too is that there's a risk in when we talk about this, talking about, you know, boys and men being kind of sitting ducks, having this information or seeking out the information even to fill the gap. And I think we need to understand too that, you know, we're talking about the internet largely. That's the way the information's coming in. That's how young boys and men are accessing this. And the experience of the internet for millennials during their coming of age was so different to what the internet is like now. It's still a vast expanse of information, but when I was a teenager, the way you navigated the internet felt expansive because of the way you kind of hopped from page to page. There's still all that information, but it's coming through 3 to 4 social media platforms.
And so what do we need to do, Albie, to reassure young men that they can have a night out with the lads, they can go to the footy, they can be masculine and still support feminism?
I think we've got to be talking about masculinity and the young male experience more positively. Another big issue that we see in the young male population are levels of suicide. I think it's the biggest killer of young men, and I've had my own mental health struggles. And it's about allowing men, when they have problems, to actually talk about those problems without saying, well, actually, it's so much worse for women. No one wants to hear when they're going through some sort of personal crisis that actually it's worse for someone else. But it feels that with young men, a lot of things are dismissed as man flu or just men acting up and it's so much worse for other people. When actually young men are having problems, they want someone to say, it's OK, I'm here to help. What can we do to make things better? And I don't feel that that is what has been going on enough.
Yeah, I think I do agree with that. And I think we always need to remember, a lot of this misogynistic language that is online, it's not just ideas, it exists in the realm of ideas, but it is a form of violence that's done to women and girls. And we're seeing it moving from the sort of realm of ideas into a sort of, a material concern, that it's in schoolyards, that we see actual violence emerging. But I would agree that, we need to talk about the fact that patriarchy diminishes life for men and women, and that men are critical to the fight for equality. At Fawcett Society, we did some research into gender norms and stereotypes in the early years, in early childhood. And we found some really interesting things about what happens to girls, but also what happens to boys. And those kind of norms come in so early on in life. We found there's research that says, typically a little boy is allowed to cry for a shorter period of time before a parent or a caregiver intervenes. And no parent or caregiver is deliberately thinking, oh, I'm going to let my little son cry for less amount of time. But those norms are so deeply ingrained. And so when we talk about the material concerns of feminism, yes, we're talking about jobs, careers, school, women in STEM, all of that sort of thing. But we're also talking about things as fundamental as men being able to talk about their emotions and what space we give to boys to feel. And that's not a system that works for anyone.
And I think that's really important, actually, because I think it's about realising that both genders, both sexes have their own unique problems and they need solving. And I think perhaps the feeling for a lot of young men is that there has been a lot of attention on women's problems, quite rightly. There are huge disparities between women and men in the workplace, in education, in healthcare outcomes, so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean that there aren't specific problems that need to be tackled for British men, whether or not that is mental health issues, whether or not that's physical health issues that affect men more than women. We've got a king who has recently been seen for enlarged prostate and is very sick. That is a men's health issue. Breast cancer was something we spoke about for a very long time. A lot of awareness about it, much less awareness about prostate cancer and issues around the prostate. So that's another example being borne out in the media at the moment. There are specific issues that men face, specific issues that women face, and they need to be tackled with equal vigour.
We must leave it there, guys. A fascinating discussion. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Thank you. Really interesting stuff. Thank you. Now, it appears there's movement this morning towards another potential pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas, and maybe, just maybe, the release of more hostages and prisoners. Diana has more in Jerusalem for us. Hi, Diana, tell us more.
Hi, Kay. Well, we're beginning to understand what it is that Hamas has proposed in terms of a possible truce. And this is according to a draft document seen by Reuters of Hamas's counter-proposal to this truce that has been under discussion between spy chiefs from the Arab states and Israel and the US since last week's meeting in Paris. And what we understand from Hamas is that they are looking at a three-phase agreement. The first 45-day phase would see the release of female hostages and children in exchange for female Palestinian prisoners and children held in Israeli jails, and also aid returned to Gaza and an IDF pullout from populated areas of Gaza. In the second phase, you would see an exchange of Israeli male hostages in exchange for a certain unspecified number of male Palestinian prisoners. And in the third 45-day phase, you would see the exchange of remains and bodies. We know, Kay, that from the IDF yesterday confirming that 31 of the hostages have been killed, as far as they understand it, in Gaza. And that at the end of that phase, Hamas would hope there to be some kind of a deal struck with Israel that this whole war come to an end. The question is that is very unpalatable for Benjamin Netanyahu. The far-right ministers in his coalition have already said they will pull out if some kind of a truce of that nature is agreed and if the war comes to an end without Hamas having been destroyed. So there is still a lot of diplomacy to go with the US Secretary of State on his last day's visit to this region, talking to Prime Minister Netanyahu today and various others.
OK, for now, thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you this morning. Happening before our very eyes, seaside towns increasingly threatened by crumbling coastlines.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Our street! Our street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything you know, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed a remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
Well, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians.
You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet.
I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem.
A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Wednesday morning, which can only mean midday is Prime Minister's Questions. Wilfred standing by for us this morning. What are you expecting, Wilfred? Morning.
Good morning to you, Kay. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's got quite tense, hasn't it, of late, and a little bit negative in tone, so I'm sure there'll be more of that. It'll be interesting to see if the Prime Minister tries to celebrate a little bit of that Northern Ireland deal that does seem like quite a long time ago already. By the way, we'll be talking to Sir Robert Buckland at about 11:15. He's, of course, chair of the committee on that, so we might go off on a little bit of a tangent there with him. A couple of other things. We're going to be talking about the latest US developments, both overseas, Blinken, of course, in the Middle East. Is there a deal coming? I know you just talked about that with Diana. And also domestically, there's a vote in the Senate today on the Ukraine funding bill that's paired with border control. Looks like that will probably crystallise the gridlock that we're now expecting to exist for the rest of the year. And we'll be joined by Cordelia in Pakistan, looking ahead to elections there tomorrow. Seminal year for elections all over the world, and of course following Imran Khan's arrest recently, his sentencing recently, and the unrest that there's been there over the last week or so.
Am I right in saying, Wilf, that half the globe is going to elections this year?
It's something remarkable, like 70-plus countries around the world, as you say. I mean, obviously, our focus is here, but also the US. And these two countries haven't had campaigns running in conjunction with each other since, I think, 1964, when that happened. And actually, there's been more debate today about whether or not that will limit where the UK election falls. People had sort of said that mid-November date. I'm never quite sure how they had precise predictions like that, given that it's so up in the air, and that now maybe they'll at least try and make it October to limit the potential fallout, which I think is relevant. Just think what happened last time in the US between Election Day and Inauguration Day, and there is an argument to want to separate the two a little bit.
Yeah, 14th of November is the prediction for the election.
Yeah, I don't know how people came up with that precise date. None of us know.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good to see you, Wilf. See you in the next hour.
See you later.
Thank you. Now, cliff top and coastal erosion are directly related to climate change, our next guest says. Along the coastline in northeast England, stormy weather and heavier rains have caused sea levels to rise, making the erosion even worse. It's a concern that's left locals fearing for their homes and their businesses. Let's get more, should we? Senior lecturer in structural geology and geohazards at the University of Hull. That's Dr. Eddie Dempsey. Hi, Doctor. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Are we seeing a rise in cliff-top erosion?
We are. When you talk to the locals here, they talk about there being large landslides over the years. They'll say, oh, there was a lot in 76, there was a lot in 83. But now there was a lot in 2007, there was a lot in 2009, there was a lot in 2012. It's almost even year now we're seeing lots of activity, and this year has been exceptional. We're seeing so many. I was only down here yesterday to see some ones that happened a few weeks ago, and there was more that happened overnight. It's quite extraordinary.
Is cliff-top erosion linked to climate change? There's the question for you.
So cliffs collapse. It's a natural geohazard or geological process. This is happening because of the sea coming in at high tides, hitting the base of the cliff, eroding away, making them unstable. With sea level rise, what's happening is even just moderate tides are reaching the cliff, so they're getting hit by the waves more often than they would normally. In addition to that, it's stormier because of climate change, and we're getting more wet weather. So particularly our winters are extremely wet at the moment. That water then percolates through the soils and sands and the bedrock and weakens them, makes them more susceptible to collapse, more susceptible to erosion. And then when we get to summertime, we're getting our hot, dry summers. They start to shrink back and dry and they crack. Come the following winter, the water is able to get back in through those cracks and make it even weaker.
OK. Doctor, fascinating stuff. Thanks for sending the pictures in as well. And we'd love to keep in touch with you. Appreciate you taking the time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hearing, actually, that apart from those high tides, more bad weather is on the way. Depends what you think about snow, actually, whether it's bad weather or not.
Well, that's true, yes. Some people like the snow.
I like the snow.
It can be quite disruptive, though. Yes, when it first snows.
Yeah. After 2 days, it's like, I'm over this.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. It's not so pretty then, is it? Well, yes, there is some snow on the way. We've had the colder air sinking southwards. That mild air that we've had recently is being replaced by the colder air. And then we're going to see some heavy rain moving in tomorrow. And that heavy rain's bumping into the cold air, and then that's going to bring some snow. So there's a graphic that just shows the cold air moving southwards, and then it's showing that we will see that boundary of like the mix between the cold in the north.
Should we have a look at that, Dan, that graphic that we're talking
about? I can talk about it, it's fine. But it's where we've got that boundary, that's where we will see the risk of some snow. So I think the heaviest snow, here it is, you can see it here. So yes, yesterday we saw the cold air moving southwards, that milder air clinging on to the south coast of England, and then it's that boundary as it's pushing back north, the milder air, that we're going to see the risk of some snow on Thursday. There is some snow around today, but mainly confined to Scotland. So that heavy rain moving in on Thursday, it will turn to snow across some central parts of the UK. Significant snow over the hills, perhaps a covering in some lower levels, and it will turn back to rain as well. But some icy conditions, some unpleasant conditions tomorrow.
OK, for now, Jo, thanks very much indeed. They certainly needed snow in Jamaica, didn't they, for Cool Runnings? Remember the 90s hit film about the bobsled team? Turns out it's been a bit of an inspiration for this guy. That's the marathon runner Daniel Fairbrother. He hopes to break the world record for running the London Marathon with a fridge, 25.7 kilos, strapped to his back. Good for him. If you weren't with us in the last hour, you would have missed the breaking news that somebody out of the three of us has not seen Cool Runnings.
No. Didn't know.
I think you've got to watch the movie trailer by the next hour.
OK, fine.
That's your homework,
I
rather than the
googled
politics.
it. It sounds really interesting,
Yeah.
but yeah, I haven't seen it. I'm so
Have you ever seen a man running a marathon with a fridge on his back?
No, I have not.
OK, well, he's going to be here in the studio in the next hour.
Amazing. I can't wait. I mean, what possessed him? Why a fridge, not a washing machine, a tumble dryer, a dishwasher? So
I think these are the big questions. And am I right in thinking that his training's had a slight mishap as well along the way?
Yeah.
We'll have more on that, won't we?
It involved the police.
Involved the police. That's as much as we can say, I think.
Yeah. I suppose with a fridge, if you want to stop for a cuppa, you can have milk in the fridge.
But it's not plugged in, so it won't keep it cold.
But it could be cold. Fridges stay
Stay cold for long enough.
Fair enough.
Or his electrolytes and water.
Yeah.
That's also a very good point. Chocolate?
Oh.
Cookies. What else could he keep in the fridge?
What else could he keep in the fridge?
Nail varnish.
You're supposed to keep nail varnish in the fridge.
Where have you been over the weekend? We know where the King's been. He's at Sandringham. What's he doing there? What's going to happen next? We have all today's top stories coming up for you in just a moment. Morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, we'll bring you the very latest on the King's health.
Plus, a call on the government to compensate patients damaged by the epilepsy drug valproate and vaginal mesh. A special report from our home editor, Jason Farrell.
And we're live at court for a case about river pollution over allegations the Environment Agency failed to protect a river in Cardiff.
It's Wednesday, the 7th of February. What next for the King as he appears in public for the first time since his shock cancer diagnosis and has a very brief visit with Prince Harry? We're live in Sandringham shortly. His Majesty spent the night there after flying by chopper from Buckingham Palace yesterday. Revealed the allegations of a toxic culture of sexual assault and misogyny in the ambulance service. Sky News investigates.
I think they thought that because they were in a green uniform, they could get away with it.
Hamas submits its response to plans for a Gaza ceasefire, offering to free more Israeli hostages in return for Palestinian prisoners. Rotten plan, dentists hit out after the government promises cash for new patients to help people like these in this queue get access. We'll tell you why.
It's not a sticking plaster over a wound. It's someone waving a box of plasters at you as they run away out the door. It's that useless.
Plus, inspired by the movie Cool Runnings, we'll be joined by the man who runs marathons with a fridge on his back. He and the fridge will be with us. Morning. The King has spent the night at Sandringham after starting his treatment for cancer and holding a rather brief meeting with Prince Harry. Laura is outside Sandringham for us today. He flew up by chopper last night. Reading in the papers this morning, he's going to spend most of his time either there or Highgrove for the foreseeable future, apart from maybe one day a week in town.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything is slightly up in the air at the moment, isn't it? It is still really early days, not just since his cancer diagnosis, but of course since he begun the course of treatment, which started on Monday. So for now, yeah, the King was here over the weekend, went back to London on Monday, spent a couple of days there, then back again here to Sandringham. And there is this suggestion that this may well be how it plays out. So the King will be in London. He can obviously do other business while in London, but primarily going for his cancer treatment and then coming back to relax and recuperate, in rural, remote parts like Sandringham here in West Norfolk. We just don't know, I think, and that's the thing. We will have to see how things progress, and we're not going to be getting those running updates or running commentary, if you like, on his progress. We haven't even, as we all know now, been told what kind of cancer he has or indeed what kind of treatment he is currently undergoing. But what we do know, obviously, is that meeting took place with Prince Harry. It was interesting, wasn't it? Just within a few moments of the announcement being made public that the King had had his diagnosis, news from California that Harry was coming back to the UK, and we saw him there just over half an hour at Clarence House, making his way straight from Heathrow Airport to see his father. The pair haven't spoken in person for months and months. They didn't really see each other at the King's coronation either. So although it doesn't feel like a long meeting, we have been told that the King was tired after his treatment, but I do think it's significant and positive, no doubt, that Harry, made the effort to come all this way back to see his father.
Indeed. For now, Laura, thank you. Well, speaking to me earlier, Labour MP Sir Chris Bryant told me of his experience with cancer and what could be done to promote awareness.
Well, I don't know what treatment he's
in your experience.
in getting. Well, so my treatment, they cut a great big chunk out of the back of my head, as you know.
Yeah.
And then they put me on targeted therapy. I had melanoma, stage 3 melanoma, and as you know, they said to me that I had a 40% chance of living a year. So that's 5 years ago. That was all very frightening, and I'm still here. I mean, the thing about cancer, I suppose, is, as the many people who are on the who will be watching will say, is that you never quite feel as if you're out of the woods. It's always sort of there at the back, well, literally at the back of my head.
Yeah.
And you do just kind of wonder what might happen again in the future.
Let's bring you more now on a Sky News investigation into allegations of misogyny and sexual harassment among paramedics. Morning.
Good morning, Kay. Yes, there are some really damning and quite difficult details in the report that we're about to bring you, because for months now I've been speaking to current and former female paramedics who have described a really toxic culture right at the heart of every ambulance service, it seems like, across the United Kingdom. They say they repeatedly suffer through sexual harassment, inappropriate sexist comments and jokes on a daily basis, and in some extreme cases, sexual abuse as well. And just a warning, the report that's coming up contains some details that might be quite upsetting to anyone, particularly around sexual harassment, self-harm and suicide as well.
They joined the ambulance service because they wanted to help people. But Sky News has spoken to female paramedics who say they found a culture there plagued by misogyny and sexual harassment. Freya says she put up with it for years, until one day a colleague locked her in the back of an ambulance and sexually assaulted her.
He just put his hand straight down my top. I was like, in shock. I couldn't move. I didn't know how to react. I just froze, absolutely froze. And if that wasn't enough, he then took my breast out and put my breast in his mouth. He took his pen and he drew a smiley face above and below my nipple. I just remember going into the station immediately when we got back, and I washed and scrubbed myself.
The trauma led Freya to try to amputate her breast and attempt to take her own life. She's received compensation from the trust and no longer works as a paramedic. After students started coming forward to complain about their experiences of sexual harassment, the College of Paramedics began an investigation.
We have found that our female student council members are experiencing misogyny and sexual harassment, if not on a daily, on a weekly basis, by a minority of people who just feel that that behaviour is acceptable. Sometimes that progresses to a really difficult space where I won't sign you off until maybe you come out for a date with me, or I won't sign you off until you send me a picture of yourself.
Laura is a newly qualified paramedic. She says women in the ambulance service are forced to put up with jokes and sexualising comments disguised as banter.
It's exhausting coming to work, dealing with inappropriate behaviour and sexual comments. It's awful. I actually look forward to the winter months where it's colder, where I can wear my jacket more often so that I'm more covered up. We've got the same uniform, you know, we've got a standardised unisex uniform, and I shouldn't have to feel like I'm being objectified and looked up and down by my colleagues, but that is the case.
An NHS spokesperson said any form of sexual misconduct is completely unacceptable, and that every ambulance trust in England has committed to a plan which commits to improving sexual safety. A number of culture reports in recent years have highlighted the open secret of sexual harassment. But victims want that secret to now be fully understood and finally dealt with.
Well, the NHS says there is no behaviour, as you heard there, for this. There is no space for this sort of behaviour, and that trusts that we know across the country say that they are changing, they're aware of it. But victims are still experiencing this every single day. And what is very clear from the people I've spoken to who've worked in the service for years is that this has been endemic for decades. This is an organisation, an institution which historically was very male-dominated, very hierarchical, and it does seem as though it's going to take a lot of work, some of it ongoing, to try and root the behaviour out.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. And if you or anyone you know needs help from the issues in the story, you can call the Samaritans on 116123 or email joe@samaritans.org.
Let's bring you some of the day's other news now,
Sure.
shall we? We'll start with the NHS, which has been battling a huge demand for dental services, leaving people queuing around the block. Now, the government is offering cash for patients. Many dentists say it's just not enough. Ollie Malone has more.
This is the problem plain to see. NHS dentistry in demand. A queue which lasted hours. Patients waiting to sign up to a new dental practice in Bristol. Many of them had little luck.
And we were all told to leave and go home and come back the next day. I was shocked at how long a queue it was, and it just showed how important it was to people to be able to register for a dentist. I also met people who were saying things like they couldn't get their dentures repaired, so they'd use super glue. and somebody else who'd taken their own tooth out by their own means, which sounds really dangerous at best and certainly painful.
That's a situation the government are hoping to change. They're set to announce a £200 million investment for a dental service that's struggling. The proposals include a Golden Hello incentive payment of £20,000 to encourage dentists to work in remote, underserved areas, a bonus payment for taking on new NHS patients, mobile dental teams to visit schools, and advice for parents about healthy gums and milk teeth. But some dentists say the money will just be divided in a different way, without amounting to much.
NHS Dentistry doesn't pay. I did a course of treatment on a patient pre-Christmas, and the laboratory charges for his work, so the crowns, the dentures that I made, and all the other stuff I did, that came to £600. The NHS actually paid me £360 to see that person. So I lost £240 out of my own pocket. Even if they put 200 million quid in, it's still not touching the sides. It's not a sticking plaster over a wound. It's someone waving a box of plasters at you as they run away out the door. It's that useless.
This is an extreme picture of a problem that has long persisted across the country. It's not yet clear whether the plans will simply polish or fix the issue at the root. Molly Malone, Sky News.
The Mayor of London has called for extra funding for the Metropolitan Police to deal with XL bully dogs. Now, new protective measures have come into force. Sadiq Khan has urged ministers to cover the cost of the work, as the force already faces a £240 million shortfall. With a new week comes new weather warnings. Starting tomorrow at 6 a.m, the Met Office has issued a yellow snow warning for the north of England and much of Wales. Disruption is expected as the warning remains in place until Friday. Women may need to work an extra 19 years to retire with the same pension savings as men. Research by Now Pensions says women end up with about £69,000 on average, compared with £205,000 for men. It points to career gaps, caring responsibilities and childcare costs as major factors. There's also been a jump in the amount needed to sustain a moderate lifestyle during retirement. That's due to the cost of living crisis.
Thanks, Gareth. It appears there's movement this morning towards another potential pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas, and maybe the release of more hostages and prisoners. Diana Magnay is in Jerusalem for us this morning. Diana, what more do we know about this?
Well, Kay, movement insofar as we've heard now from Hamas in terms of what how they see a possible truce going. This is according to a draft document seen by Reuters, in which Hamas says that they would agree to 3 45-day phases to any kind of ceasefire, which would see in the initial phase the exchange of female hostages and any hostages under 19 years old in exchange for women and children held in Israeli jails. The second phase would see male hostages exchanged for male Palestinian prisoners, and all the while IDF phased pullouts. The second phase would see the IDF withdrawing completely from Gaza, and in the third phase there would be an exchange of bodies and remains of what we now understand are the 31 hostages killed in Gaza, confirmed by the IDF yesterday. And over the course of that 4.5-month ceasefire, Hamas would hope to have struck a deal indirectly with Israel to bring this war to an end. Now, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, has been in the region talking to mediators in Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. He's in Israel today. The problem with this truce is that it is unpalatable to certainly the far-right ministers in Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition, who threatened to pull out and let the government fall if Benjamin Netanyahu agrees to any kind of truce of this nature, which would see a huge number of Palestinian prisoners released, 1,500, according to this draft document. But Benjamin Netanyahu is also under a lot of pressure to get the hostages out. So there will still be a lot of diplomacy needed. We'll have to see how far this proposal goes.
OK, for now, thank you. Quick look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Rest of the week will be colder than of late, with some wintry hazards, especially tomorrow. For now, it's frosty for many, but the far south is milder. Southern England will be rather cloudy through the morning, with showers affecting the southwest. Elsewhere, it's going to be mainly dry with some hazy sunshine, but northern areas can expect showers with sleet and snow possible.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you, the marathon runner with a fridge strapped to his back. I'll ask him why he's doing it and why he was stopped by the police.
Day one of the satellite revolution.
Living Downing Street.
Stabbed to death.
Rainbow Nation.
Not guilty.
Diana, Princess of Wales.
I did not.
What a sight. A wall of water.
Another incident.
Stricken mammal. Lehman's collapse.
God bless you.
Oil to gush.
Freedom. London Olympic. Do you feel scared?
Great again.
That's breaking news. Just bring you some breaking news we're getting.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone. I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News at the Old Bailey.
Hi everybody. Getting motivated to go for a run can be hard enough at the best of times. You know what it's like. Putting your trainers on is probably the best way to, once you're out the door, you're done. What about if you have to put your fridge on your back as well? 25 kilos to be precise. Look who's here. Morning, morning, morning.
Hi.
This is impressive, I have to say. So let me introduce you to Daniel Fairbrother. Tell me all about it. Turn around first of all, let me see the fridge.
Yes, so this is Tallulah, my fridge.
There she is. And tell us why she's called Tallulah.
So Tallulah is named after Cool Runnings, one of my favourite films growing up.
It's the rig, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, they famously named their bobsleigh Tallulah.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a bit of fun to play on words. And yeah, I've called her Tallulah, and she's currently the second lady in my life at the moment, which hasn't gone down well.
So tell me why you thought, you know what, I'm going to run with a fridge on my back.
So my best friend Sam, he's type 1 diabetic. Last year I tried to take on a challenge for him to raise some money for Diabetes UK. It didn't go as planned, and that frustrated me. So I said to him, look, I'm going to come up with a bigger and better idea. And I heard about a world record for the London Marathon for fastest marathon run with a fridge. And I thought I could do that. Why, I don't know, but I just know that it's something I can achieve. And thankfully, it's going well, and it's attracted a lot of attention.
So what are the challenges with running with a 27-kilo fridge on your back?
The biggest issue is the additional weight to my body. My legs at the moment are struggling, they're feeling it. I have to have a very different running style, so I'm sort of hunched over, everything against that you want to do when you're running. It doesn't help with your breathing. Windy days aren't fun. I'm like a lorry on the motorway being blown about.
Yeah.
So there's lots of challenges, but the biggest one is weight at the moment.
I'm sure. And how is it? I can see the green straps and I can see the harness, if you will. If I run across the road and I've got my rucksack on, it bounces around all over the place. So what do? How do you stop that happening?
So I've got this luggage carrier, which is actually pretty good. It's got a metal frame that supports Tallulah.
Turn to the side, and then maybe we can, because then Matt will be able to see it.
There's a metal frame that runs down my back underneath the fridge, and it's strapped fairly well to Tallulah on there. As long as I can get the straps tight on the fridge, on the backpack, sorry, the fridge is pretty good and it sort of sticks with me. But it's been a learning curve, being able to run with the fridge, because, like you say, it's not normal at all.
The team wanted to know why a fridge rather than a washing machine or other white appliance.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could have gone with a toaster. That would have been easier.
That would have been.
Yeah.
That's not the first time you've said that, is it?
No.
No, I can tell.
No, I just thought, look, the record's held with a fridge. It's unusual. Let's go like for like. And I just thought it would be a bit of fun, really.
Yeah, Tony Hawk's did it, didn't he?
He did, yes.
He was a comedian
Ireland.
around Ireland. It was once a question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I was on with Eamon Holmes.
Oh,
and he knew the answer. So if you are in a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire question going forward, I'll know the answer to that as well. How much are you hoping to raise?
I'm hoping to raise £10,000 for Diabetes UK. I do have a Just Giving page set up.
Tell us.
If you want to have a look, it's Just Giving Daniel Fairbrother, which is my name. My story will come up, all my runs are logged on there. If I have any brushes with the law or anything like that, I get it all logged on there.
I was coming to that. Tell me, what happened?
So I was out on my second ever training run, running through Stevenage Town Centre. Obviously, I was getting a lot of funny looks, getting a lot of attention because I've got a fridge on my back. A police car passed me in the other direction, and sure enough, they turned around, and the next thing I know, they've illuminated their blue lights. They've stopped the traffic, and rightly so, they had a lot of questions for me. What are you doing? Is that a fridge on your back? All this sort of stuff.
Yes, officer.
Thankfully, after a very short conversation and me explaining what was happening, they were really good.
Did they sponsor you?
Not that I'm aware of, so Hertfordshire Police, come on.
Yeah, exactly, come on. And how long what time are you hoping to do?
So the record stands at 4 hours, 52 minutes and 10 seconds.
I couldn't do that without a fridge.
Yeah. I'm training to do it in 4.5 hours.
OK, and how's the training going?
It's going really well, thank you. I did a half marathon at the weekend. That's the longest I've run so far. That was really positive. I do train with a lot of hill sections involved, so I'm hoping that will help pay off on the flat roads of London.
Yeah, we were debating, I don't know if you heard earlier on, we were debating what you might keep in the fridge. Now, I thought you might have milk in case it was like a cup of tea. I can't remember what Gareth said now. What did you say, Gareth? What did he have in the fridge, did you say?
Water, electrolytes.
Water, electrolytes. See, that would be sensible. At the moment, I can confirm it is empty, but there may be a couple of beers for when I cross the finish line. OK, and Mari thought nail polish. I don't need to be adding any unnecessary weight to my fridge at the moment.
Is there anything in it at the moment?
No, just a standard fridge. It's got all the shelves in there, so it's completely standard.
OK. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Let us know how you get on.
I will do. I'll keep in contact.
Keep in touch, and we will obviously make sure that everybody knows what you're up to. Look after your knees.
I will try.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Are you jogging
Kate.
away, or are you staying with us?
Oh, no, I'm just going to go for a little run back to Stevenage now. If that's all right.
It's good to see you. Thanks very much. If you jog, we've got some music that we can play.
Yeah, should we go?
See
Here
ya.
we go. See ya. Thank you.
Bye. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you this morning, our Westminster Insiders look at the week in politics, and it's a week where the pressure isn't easing on Rishi Sunak. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, as you can see, the team are all here. We've got all today's top stories. We're also going to be talking about Prime Minister's questions and, indeed, what is going to happen. Well, we've got Katie here and we've got Ian, and they're going to tell us in more detail what they think about Rishi Sunak's week so far and what else is to come. Before that, though, we've got some breaking news.
Yes, this is from Pakistan. At least 24 people have been killed in a pair of bombings in the country. Both happened outside electoral candidate offices in the province of Balochistan. Pakistan's seeing a wave of violence ahead of general elections tomorrow. As yet, no group has claimed responsibility, but this follows an uptick in violence ahead of the elections, follows the arrest and sentencing of Imran Khan as well, with regards to his convictions for leaking state secrets and also for other issues. He claims they are politically motivated. We'll have more on that through the course of the morning. In other news, the King has spent the night at Sandringham after starting his treatment for cancer and holding a brief meeting with Prince Harry. The Duke of Sussex travelled from California to meet with his father. A culture of misogyny and sexual harassment is evident within every trust across the 4 nations of the UK. That's according to the Chief Executive of the College of Paramedics. Sky News has spoken to paramedics who describe a culture of daily toxic harassment that in some cases turns into sexual assault. And the Environment Agency has been taken to court by a campaign group today over the pollution in the River Wye that's partly caused by chicken manure. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore joins us live from the Cardiff Civil Justice Centre. Thomas.
Yes, indeed. We hear an awful lot about sewage in our rivers, but the problem on the River Wye, which stretches the border between Wales and England, is agricultural runoff. There are 20 million chickens being raised in the area at any one time, producing an awful lot of chicken poo. And the River Action, the campaign group, is now taking the Environment Agency to court for what it says is a failure in its legal duty to stop excessive amounts of manure being spread on the fields, far more than crops and plants could absorb, and the rest is just being washed into the river, where it causes an explosion in algae, turns the water green, starves the rest of wildlife in the water of oxygen, and it is killing the river, they say. The Environment Agency says that they are doing farm inspections. It can lead to prosecutions, but River Action says that's not happening fast enough. And what is supposed to be one of the UK's most highly protected rivers is in an ecological crisis. This is going to be a 2-day judicial review, with a hearing being heard in a few weeks' time.
Thomas Moore, thank you in Cardiff for us.
Look who's here, Katie and Ian. Let's talk about events of the week and what might happen going forward. What did you make of the popcons, first of all?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of being in the room.
Fabulous. How was it? What was the atmosphere like?
In the room, the atmosphere was very positive. It was very full. I had to sit on the floor for most of it. But I think within the room, you could see Liz Truss got a very friendly reception when she accused some of her colleagues who weren't in the room of coming up with policies so they were acceptable company at London dinner parties. And she said she hadn't really been invited to any London dinner parties. The crowd seemed to say, and she said, I might get some invites, now from that. So it felt as though there was warmth towards those there. I think the question is, filling one room isn't the same as having a movement. And you look at the polling, and I think lots of Tory MPs who stayed away from it would say that she is not the right, person to be leading a movement called Popular Conservatism.
Yeah, hey, you have to start somewhere, don't you? Popular Conservatives, will we see them on the ballot at the next election?
No, and if you do have to start somewhere, you don't start with Liz Truss. I really would have to think very hard to think of a politician in this country who would be more detrimental to the image of your political movement than Liz Truss at this point in time. So it's almost like you're looking at the death size of right-wing populism in this country. It starts with this will of the people against the elites. That's the rhetoric we heard over Brexit. Then you get to this small room with one of the least popular politicians in the country talking about how now we represent the popular will. There's no possible basis upon which you could say such a thing. And indeed, she doesn't represent the popular will, and neither do any of the people who shared that stage with her.
Somebody who wasn't there but announced his plans to step down just before was her former Chancellor. I mean, was that a surprise or not really?
I don't think that was a surprise. I thought it was interesting on the day you had one obviously very former senior Trussite, Kwasi Kwarteng, who served as Liz Truss's Chancellor, exiting, and then you had Liz Truss doubling down almost. And I think they've taken quite different lessons from that premiership. I think when it comes to Kwasi Kwarteng, he has kept a fairly low profile, and in the media appearances he has done, I think he's shown quite a bit of humility. Yes, he said, we should still do tax cuts, but I think there's been more of a sense of reflection and saying where he thought they went wrong. So I think that in terms of where the Trussites are going, there's almost two schools of thought, and I think some think that it was more the system that was against them, and that's probably Liz Truss.
I bet you £1,000 it was a bad idea to make a £1,000 bet.
Yes, I wouldn't be able to take that bet because I don't go around throwing 1,000 quid around on a blithe moment. Also, I like to think, and it's very modest, but I have some presence of mind, which evidently our Prime Minister doesn't. So that the response to this point is kind of extraordinary, right? Like, you could look at the moment that he takes that bet with Piers Morgan on a moral basis. Like, it doesn't matter what you think about immigration, about refugees, is it really a suitable, ethical thing to be taking bets on whether you're going to be able to get plane loads of asylum seekers off? That doesn't seem like a good way to behave. But kind of politically, the more damaging element of it is to have a Prime Minister there who's just saying, oh, sorry, you know, apparently I don't like doing those bets, but if someone says to me, I'll bet you £1,000, you just shake their hand and say yes. And you think, like, do you really have no solidity in your mind in the way that you conduct yourself? How exactly would you behave if you were sat in a room with Vladimir Putin, if apparently Piers Morgan is too much for you to withstand? As a moment, that is just a catastrophic moment, politically, psychologically, presentationally, for Rishi Sunak.
Interesting if you're going to go that strong. We had a minister on yesterday, and I put that to him. He said, oh, I haven't seen it, I don't read the papers, it's a sideshow, I wouldn't have done it, I don't bet. And our Sam Coates said it was the closest thing to another Tory MP going against Sunak.
Yeah, I think what was interesting was the minister saying question, so almost a Sunak loyalist. So to say, oh, well, it's not something I would do, feels a little bit less trying to come up with a helpful reason and verging on critical. I think it was clearly a clumsy thing to do. You look at the clip and you slightly wonder if Rishi Sunak knew what was going on when he goes to shake the hand. I wonder if, like, you know, there's almost a sense where maybe he thinks he's being polite, but he's actually bet £1,000, which isn't me making an excuse for Rishi Sunak. I just mean as in the whole exchange just looks very bizarre. And then you have a situation where they're very quickly trying to row back on it. So I don't think it's the most questionable thing Rishi Sunak has done or his biggest error in his premiership. But I do think with hindsight, he clearly would have tried to avoid it. Because also, I think regardless of issues in terms of should you be betting on people being kicked out of the country, it plays into this sense that he is rich and the words that come up are out of touch.
Yeah.
And I think that is why most people in a cost of living crisis have been like, what do you mean off the cuff you're just going to bet £1,000?
And it was on the same day that they were putting £300 in people's bank accounts who couldn't afford to live otherwise because of the cost of living crisis. That was my take on it. That's certainly what I put to the minister yesterday. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really know anyone that just has £1,000 to just splash out on a quick bet. Most people think quite deeply about £1,000, if that's something they're doing. Now, you start putting together the pictures of Sunak. This is all really preventable. He doesn't have to allow it to go this way. And I think people have sympathy for, if you happen to be rich, it shouldn't rule you out from being Prime Minister or being in politics. But you start putting together the helicopters, you start putting together the clothing, you start putting together some of the manner, and then moments like this, and you get a pretty dangerous set of visuals when you're about to go into a general election.
He had a good start to the week, though, with Northern Ireland, didn't he? Did he feel the hand of history on his shoulder?
I think there probably was a sense of that. I think it's one of those ones where I'm not sure it'll get him any electoral bounce because we've seen in polling, I think in terms of lots of voters in the UK don't particularly spend that much time thinking about Northern Ireland. But I do think in terms of, we're almost in the stage where, because so many people are writing off the Tories, you get into the discussion, which is, what will Rishi Sunak's legacy be? The cigarette policy, you know, trying to have that smoke-free generation, I think you can very much see as a legacy policy, a bit like the net zero target with Theresa May. And I think when it comes to what else Rishi Sunak would say, should he somehow not win the next election, it will be actually getting power sharing back, fixing some of the issues caused by the original Brexit deal.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the latest polling and the poll of polls. It's about the same between the two main parties, as it has been for some time. It's not narrowing, it's not widening, particularly. And looking at other polls, people don't particularly care for Keir Starmer either.
No, they don't. They're not particularly inspired by him, and that's partly a product of the strategy that Labour's gone for, which is just a small target strategy. You just think, like, you know, the election is yours to lose, essentially. The government is deeply unpopular. It's been 14 years. You've got an unpopular person leading it. Most of the public services are falling apart around you, so we just shrink the target the Conservatives have against us. You see that in the debate over the 28 billion on energy. Just think, don't give them a dividing line. In fact, all of politics, and it will be for the rest of the year, is essentially the Conservatives going, let's find a dividing line with Labour, and Labour going, we will neutralise your dividing line to make this about, you've been in power for 14 years, why is the country such a mess? And in that context, look, that is an effective electoral strategy at this moment. It is not a way to make people fall in love with the leader of your party, and it is not accomplishing that.
Yeah, and I think it's also potentially storing up some problems for a Labour government if they, do, as all the polls suggest, win at the next election. Because you will have, I think, by not saying too much and scaling back some things confusion, it does mean when you want to do bold things, either voters could be taken a bit by surprise or could question what your mandate is, and you haven't necessarily laid the groundwork. So I think you can see why they're thinking, say less, you will be attacked less. But I think in terms of thinking about what you're actually going to do once you're in number 10, it is a strategy which will create some problems.
Okay.
And,
oh, you were going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and I think, I mean, adding to the potential problems, just the confusion right now in that 28 billion is just one of those ones where you think, whatever you're going to do, having people say different things every day does not bode that well for some of the tricky decisions you'll get if you were in government.
Have you got anything else to say, Don?
I would also like them to sort out the 28 billion.
Yes, I did put that to Chris Bryant earlier on. And where does the 28 billion actually come from? Show me the figures. We're still waiting. We'll see. We'll see. Good to see you as always. Thanks very much indeed, team. Thanks a lot. Wilfred standing by for us. PMQs at midday. Wilf, good morning.
Very good morning to you, Kay. Looking forward to PMQs, as we've said. But do you know what? I wonder if the bet will come up, as you were just mentioning there with your panel. I kind of agree with Katie a little bit on that. I don't know that the Prime Minister fully knew what he was doing. It did look a bit awkward. He kind of shook the hand. It is worth pointing out the bet that the proceeds are going to charity within the bet, if they both did know what was going on. And I don't know, my other view on that, rather annoyingly to admit, is I think the man conducting the interview, Piers Morgan, probably knew exactly what he was doing and creating this controversy such that we're all talking about it. So actually, it annoys me that I even mention it and give him that credit.
OK. Wilf, we're going to have to leave it there because we need to bring in a news conference as it relates to Hamas hostages. Bear with me. Evacuated families of 4 Hamas